Welcome to the Unstoppable CEO podcast with Steve Gordon.
Welcome to the Unstoppable CEO podcast. I'm your host, Steve Gordon, and we got a dynamite episode here for you today. I'm talking with Jay Lucas. Jay is an accomplished businessman. He's an author, a leader, a philanthropist, and he believes in the power of positivity, patriotism, and community engagement. He's actively spreading his message through his best-selling book, American Sunshine, Rays of Hope and Opportunity. And Jay is an example of service. He was an elected state representative while still in college at Yale. He then earned his MBA from Harvard Business School and his law degree from Harvard Law School. He's now the chairman and managing partner of the Lucas Group, where he and his team focus on working with private equity investors and with their portfolio companies. And he's now also actively involved in revitalizing his hometown in New Hampshire, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's just got a wealth of experience. This is going to be a different interview than I think anything we've ever done before, and I think you're going to get a ton of value out of it. Jay Lucas, welcome to the Unstoppable CEO.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve, and it's a delight to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we're going to cover some new and interesting things. And just before we kind of get into the meat of things, I think it'd be helpful for everybody to have a little bit of context for for your background, where you've kind of come from through your career to get to this point. Can you give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, sure. I'd be delighted. So I started out, I grew up in a very small town up in western part of New Hampshire. And I went to public school, Newport, New Hampshire, Newport High School. And then had the great experience, great opportunity to go for my undergrad work at Yale. And as you mentioned, then on to law school and business school. And my career has largely been around business. I was also really fortunate to be one of the early partners at a fast-growing, now global consulting firm, strategy consulting firm, Bain. Some people may know of Bain and Company, BAIN, or Bain Capital. Our most famous alumnus is clearly Mitt Romney. He was a partner in the early days with me. And thereafter, having been part of an organization that, I mean, it's interesting. When I joined the company, the firm, I think there were about 80 people in the entire firm. When I left about 10 years later, there were about 1,200. And so just a meteoric growth opportunity, basically helping businesses grow. That has been our focus, aligning with one client in a particular industry, and then really trying to help that client win, that company win in their business. And enormous amount of fun. Decided that I was becoming a little bit of a small cog in a large machine, and really wanted to set off and become much more entrepreneurial. And so I did. Founded the Lucas Group. And as you mentioned, Steve, our focus is not so much working with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 kinds of companies, but instead working directly with private equity investors as we analyze and identify good investment, good companies to acquire, and then work with them and work with the management teams to help grow those companies, develop the strategies to grow the companies, create great opportunities for people inside the companies, and try to do things that are going to really satisfy their customers. And as you mentioned along the way, I have been involved in politics, early on government. I was fortunate enough as actually a college undergraduate to run for state elected office, also in New Hampshire, served 2 terms as a state representative. And then many years later, I felt as though the state was moving in the wrong direction, and I got involved, and I actually ran for governor and won my party's nomination, lost the general election. But what a great experience that is and was. But one of the things that taught me was just how behind the times really state government really is in terms of being a modern functioning organization. So subsequently took many of the skill sets and business capabilities we have in the consulting firm and began deploying those on behalf of states and governors and their staffs around the country to help improve some would say the efficiency of state government, but really the ability of state government to use modern business practices to help people, do the jobs that they need to do. And beyond that, I'm more recently involved in a couple of causes that I feel really strongly about. I'm happy to kind of walk through some of those as the conversation develops. But that's just a very quick sketch of some of the things I've been involved in, Steve.
Well, it's quite a diverse background, and it's interesting having in the past had the thought of moving towards politics myself. I got to tell you, the way things are in our discourse right now, you've got to be bulletproof if you're going to do that. And so I commend you for serving in that way. It's I think it's very difficult to put yourself out in that arena. It operates very differently than the business world. So over all of that span of experience, I'm sure there were times where things didn't go exactly as you had planned. What are some of the ways of thinking or the habits that you've accumulated over time that kind of helped propel you forward even when things were tough?
Well, I am a huge proponent of positive thinking, and some of the phrases or some of the beliefs I have, and kind of the framework I've developed is really around the notion that there's a great power to the human spirit, and that if you're optimistic, you're enthusiastic, you're positive, you're going to send out vibes, and those vibes are going to have a dramatic impact on your ultimate destiny. So that when you find yourself surrounded by circumstances that appear negative, hopeless, there's a great temptation to give in to the pessimism, to get actually into a kind of almost a physical position where you're all crouched over, you're tightened up, and things. When you get into that kind of a position or that kind of thought pattern, things generally are not going to go well for you because you're not feeling optimistic, you're not positive, you're not making things happen. And so one of the things that I kind of developed early on was when you find yourself in some moment like that, I think there's a great tendency to be looking back and having regrets, or looking, as I like to say, imagine yourself way up high and looking down. And when you're way up high and you're looking way down, it can be pretty scary. So don't look down, don't look back, but always look forward and look up. And so in other words, look what you can do in the future, look forward and look up with great optimism and enthusiasm to have a vision for where you want to get to, because there's really there's nothing harder for the human mind to do than to be looking at a set of circumstances, and rather than have those circumstances really influence his or her own worldview and opinion, you got to have a mindset that says, hey, regardless of these circumstances, I know where I'm going. I know where we're going to get to. I have faith. that we're going to get there. And that's kind of the mindset that I think is so powerful, because it not only has a direct impact on the way you think and on the way your actions will progress, but I really know that in human interaction, people sense it. They can sense a confidence, and that positive vibe, there's an energy. Some people will say, and I do like this notion that thoughts are things, that thoughts can manifest themselves into great realities, and that I think people around you get a sense of, if you really do have those positive thoughts, they're going to be feeling more positive and much more inclined to be helpful to you, and good things tend to happen. So that's been my philosophy, and it's worked for me. And it's something I really subscribe to.
I think that's a great way of looking at things, and I do agree that thoughts are things, or at least they turn into, because the thing that you're most focused on is usually the thing that you end up working towards, whether you want to or not. And whether you're conscious of it or not, it's the thing that you work towards most. One of the observations that I've made over the years, particularly with business owners, is when things get bad, they focus on kind of all of the negative events that are happening around them. They tend to withdraw and kind of isolate themselves a little bit. And when you're really positive and you're looking towards the future, I think it's very hard to do. It's almost like you're driven to go and connect with other humans. And so that's, to me, that's a fantastic way to be.
Oh yeah. And your observation, Steve, I think is right on. If you remember going through some of these economically more challenging times, certainly the 08-09 recession for many people was one of those. You had a couple of different things you could do. One, which was not a particularly successful strategy, is exactly what you just described, where business owners would feel threatened, and understandably threatened, and really kind of withdraw unto themselves. And so here's a story for you. So if any of our listeners, excuse me, remember what it was like in that fall of 2008, it was, from a business and economic perspective, it was feeling as though the world was just about to end. Maybe it had ended. We didn't know. Orders in many businesses totally dried up in the months of October and November 2008. And so we, being a consulting firm at the Lucas Group, it was a time when new business also was not coming in the door. And in a consulting firm with, many employees, with a number of employees, you have fixed costs, and you really need those revenues coming in. So our choice was either to kind of hunker down and withdraw, or to do what you're suggesting, Steve. So what I did is I decided that, and it just, purely made this up, that it would be a great time to hold a forum. And what we'd do is we'd invite all of our clients and all of our friends, and we'd get a big conference room, and we'd bring everybody into town, and we'd have a forum where we'd talk about a little bit. We talked a little bit to start the meeting about, gee, things are really tough. But what was really, really exciting is that as the meeting developed, just having that group of people and the synergy of it, there was great sense of optimism coming out of that. And I think, that optimism literally did, in several instances, help people get through the recession in a good way. And as I sit down with some of them today, their businesses are so much stronger than they were then. And I think some small amount of credit does go to that forum, and just kind of get them positive energy flowing for those folks and giving them the confidence that they really needed. And so it's just a small example of what you're saying, Steve, I think is so very true.
What a great strategy. I want to turn our focus a little bit onto some of the things that you're working on now. And before we do that, we're going to take a quick break, but you're going to want to stay tuned, because Jay is working on some really amazing projects. And I think everything from what it means to be a modern patriot to how to revitalize a community, and all within the context of business. You're going to want to stick around and listen to this. We'll be right back with more from Jay Lucas. Hi, this is Steve. I hope you're enjoying this interview. We've got more to come in a minute, but what I'd love for you to do right now is rate this podcast. Leave us a review, rate us on iTunes. It'll really help others discover the podcast and help us help other CEOs, other business leaders become unstoppable. So if you go to unstoppableceo.net/iTunes, you can find instructions there and links that will take you right to where you need to go to review the podcast. Thanks so much. Now back to the interview. Welcome back. This is Steve Gordon, and I'm talking with Jay Lucas. And Jay, we kind of left off, and I want to talk now about the things you're working on now. You've got a book out called American Sunshine, Rays of Hope and Opportunity. And you talk about this idea of modern patriotism, and I'd love to understand that a little bit more. And I also want to dive into what you're doing in your hometown in Newport, New Hampshire. And so let's start off with the book. Tell us a little bit about the book and what motivated you to write that.
Yeah, the book, American Sunshine, is, and its title kind of does give it away a little bit. But American Sunshine it's a vision for America, but it's a vision that says, what if we could get past all this political bickering and divisiveness and all the negativity, but we really got back to some of our founding values and projected ourselves and said, what could we be as a nation? And that literally that's the central theme of American Sunshine. It's a very positive view of our country and what our future can hold. But at the same time, it's also got a second dimension, which is in parallel, it's a spiritual dimension. So think of it as, I have a strong belief in the power of the human spirit, of the potentiality of the human future and what we can achieve. And so it has this spirituality to it, and it's a very positive book in that respect, because it comes back to some of the things we were just discussing earlier, Steve, that you can manifest your future and really create a positive future if you send out those positive vibes. And then thirdly, it has one other piece to it, which I think it's a fun book. And it's a fun book in the sense that it has 28 chapters, and each chapter has its own cartoon. So people can read it and you get cartoons, and it's fun, but it also, I think, has some very positive messages in it. And I wrote the book really because at a certain point in your life, you've gone through a number of experiences, and you feel as though it's a great opportunity to share some of those insights and experiences with others, and hopefully you'll have a good impact on other people's lives.
I'm glad you shared it. And I think tying these ideas together, I mean, if you think about the way that the United States was founded, it really was founded on this principle that there is this great potentiality in human beings, and that there is this growth to come in all of humanity, and the country was really created to create a place where that could be allowed to flourish. Now, have we had our problems? Of course we have. We're human. But if you go back and read what was observed about this country's founding from people in other parts of the world, particularly in Europe, because they probably had the most contact with us, there's that thought that here's something new and different that had never happened before, and it unlocked something. And I appreciate you shining a light on that, because I think that's missing, and I don't think that the United States has a complete lock on that anymore. Other parts of the world have gravitated more towards these same ideals, but that line of thinking for humanity, I think, is important. It's missing now. I think we've lost focus on it. So I appreciate you taking the time and the effort of writing a book to point that out.
No, but Steve, you're so right. You are absolutely so spot on in what you're saying. That was the founding ethos and principle of America. It was really to create a place where we're joined or united by a set of ideas. We're not one ethnic group or one a group who's come here without homogenization. But the reason that we're here and the reason that we're so special is that we've all subscribed to this common set of beliefs of things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and tolerance, and the idea of the great potentiality of the individual, and that the individual is supreme, and that our government works for the individual, not the other way around. So, and all of these are just so fundamental to America. And just like you said, in the early 1800s, when foreign European visitors would come, like notably a fellow named Alex de Tocqueville, who wrote great volumes about what he observed by traveling really throughout America, he was breathlessly taken away by just what an entrepreneurial unleashing of the human spirit that he saw here in America, which was so much in contrast to the Europe of the time. And I think the other observation I would have today is that while all of that remains, true in our history, that today, we as Americans, particularly if we've grown up here, there's a tendency to take it for granted and not really fully acknowledge or appreciate or recognize just what a special place we have. But I do see that. Here's a kind of an interesting example. I tend to, because I travel a lot in business, so I'll find myself in the back of either a taxi cab or an Uber or whatever it might be, and I get into a conversation, and I love to have conversations with people, and so my typical and many of the drivers, by the way, are not from didn't grow up here in the United States, and so an initial question oftentimes is, so I'll ask, so you didn't grow up here in America. Where did you come from? They'll tell me what country it was, and then the conversation pretty rapid. I might ask them how long they've been here, and then one question I always ask is that, do you like it here? Do you like it here in America? And almost 10 out of 10 will say, yeah, well, I love it here. And then I'll ask, what do you find that what's so special about America? 9 times out of 10, if not more than that, the word that'll come, it's a word. It comes back as freedom. So in America, you're free. You can do anything you want. It can become anything you want to be. And that's and it's so recognized by these people who have not grown up here, and they see that distinct difference, and they just, so fully appreciate it, and they love being here in America. So that's how it comes to life for me.
Yeah, it's almost like I try and convey this to our kids all the time. I mean, our repeated phrase to them is that you have won the genetic lottery. You happen to be born here. You could have been born anywhere. You happen to be born here. And then my next question to them is, okay, well, what are your plans now? What are you going to do with it? And I think it's difficult for them to understand. I think it's taken me. I'm 47 years old this year. It's taken me most of those 47 years just to realize, that I'm a fish swimming in water, and if you grow up and you have these freedoms, it's easy to take them for granted because it's just the way things are. And without the contrast of, I almost think I have that same experience in Ubers and cabs and, all the time when I'm talking to a driver and they're from somewhere else, they have an appreciation for all of the freedoms that exist, particularly here, but also exist in a lot of other places in the Western world, that those of us who were born here and grow up here don't have, because they've seen the contrast. And it's striking to me, and it's taken me a long time to really come to that realization. One of the things that freedom affords you is you get to go out and pick projects and choose things. You can look at a situation that you want to improve, and you've got the freedom to go do that. And I know that you have done that in your hometown in Newport, New Hampshire. Tell us a little bit about that initiative. I know you're doing some unique things to attract businesses in.
Yeah, this is I've never done anything as rewarding as what I'm doing now, and it's a revitalization project in a town I grew up in. And so picture a town in western New Hampshire, town of about 6,000 people called Newport. And it's unique, but it's not unique in a lot of ways, in the sense that there's so many other towns around New England and around the Midwest, really around throughout our country, who have shared experience with what's happened and been happening in Newport, in the sense that over the last, say 20, 30, 40 years, what was a bustling main street, very vibrant main street in a small town, wonderful place to grow up. Today, when you go back and you take a look at that same main street in that same town, there's this long, slow economic decline as jobs have left the area, in some cases left the country. That main street is not that bustling place anymore. It's not entirely vacant, but for sure, but there's many vacancies along the main street, and it just doesn't have the vitality. And you get a sense that if you're a young person, you're not looking to either stay or come back to Newport because the jobs just really aren't there, the opportunities aren't. And of course, in our area, we've been hit with a double whammy because the opioid crisis has really been a major impact on the region. But then that's true throughout other parts of the country as well, for sure. Well, earlier this year, back really in about January, February, I decided that I just happened to be driving through town one day, and it just came over me, and I said, I'm going to change this. We're going to revitalize Newport. So it began, and I must admit, we really didn't have any particular concept. It was exactly how that was all going to happen. But I just knew that here's an opportunity, and I've got relationships and resources because I've done a number of things in business, and there's some things I could bring to the community to be very, very helpful and at least be a spark plug, maybe be a champion, put some energy into this. And so we began with 2 people and then 12, and now we're up to about somewhere between 150 and 175 people with our shoulders leaning into this initiative. And the whole idea is to bring vitality and economic opportunity and just a sense of real life back to Newport so that we can kind of give opportunities to the next generation. They really afforded me some wonderful opportunities growing up and being a Newporter. I'll always be a Newporter. But you got to think a little bit out of the box. And so we're doing some things that, a little bit, I would think, traditional, trying to find businesses to relocate in the town and so forth. But some really cool things that we're doing. In addition to that, there's an old mill in town, beautiful old mill. But the problem is that it's been vacant or dormant for the last 40 years. And while it's been sort of kept up physically, there's just nothing there. So we're revitalizing or restoring that mill. We're putting in 47 independent living apartments. We're putting in a health center right in that old mill area, keeping the character of the mill, and then also a restaurant with riverfront dining. And this old dormant mill that people would sort of pass by, day in and day out, is now going to become sort of an economic center, kind of a vibrant place for the community, working with a developer to help get the various tax credits and financing that's required to make this project really work. But that's an exciting project to be a magnet for the whole community. But then I'll just mention quickly, Steve, 2 out-of-the-box ideas that I think can be employed by other communities, as certainly the method of thinking, at least, let's say. So Newport being remote, being somewhat isolated, I was thinking, there must be digital opportunities that can really revitalize this community. And so I began working with 3 entrepreneurial digital firms in New York City. And they were kind enough to volunteer to put together a program a training program in digital. So web design, coding, programming, some Java. And so what we constructed was a 12-week training program for 20 students in Newport to be fully trained and certified at the end of this period. Now, they could get their training without even leaving the community. But even more important, that once certified, they will be qualified to do work for these same firms in New York City or really any place around the world and really earn some great income. And in the way we're in the midst of that program right now. It's really working. What's really interesting and probably one of the most important parts of it to me is that the people we originally thought this was going to be a program for only high school students. But what it turned out is that we have several high school students among the 20 students, but we also have people in their 20s, 30s. We got 2 people in their 60s, because the town and community just hasn't afforded the opportunities, and they see this program as a real way of achieving and improving their set of opportunities. And they're so enthused about the program, and I'm enthused about it for that reason. I'm also thinking that, we're doing one 12-week training session now of 20 people, but that's really, the way to think about it is it's not the only 20, it's just the first 20. And so we're going to do 20 more and 20 more and 20 more. And it's really going to change the fabric of the town. So that's I think, a real game changer for Newport, and I'm really enthused about it.
Yeah, I think we're in a great retooling in this country, and I think it's happening in others as well, as we sort of move. I don't think we're moving beyond the industrial age. Things need to be made and built and all of that, but where that happens has shifted. And I think we're in this great retooling of our economy. And it used to be that you had to centralize everything because of the need for massive capital. And now we're seeing that the opposite can happen because of technology, because of the internet. You can now work in this distributed way. I mean, we're a great example of that. We've got a team that spans both sides of the Atlantic, and none of us in the same physical location. I happen to live in a little town called Tallahassee in Florida. I didn't grow up here, and certainly wasn't the first place I lived. I moved here by choice, and am able to work with companies all over the world because of technology. And I couldn't have done that 15 years ago or 20 years ago, at least not to the degree that we're doing now. And it creates all kinds of amazing opportunities for little communities like Tallahassee, like Newport, like all across the country, these little towns that have been kind of forgotten but are great places to live, where you can find really good, hardworking people and smart people that, if they have the skills, they don't need to live in New York City or in LA or in Silicon Valley. Just huge opportunity. So I applaud what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Well, we've got one more, many more, but here's one other sort of out of the box way of thinking that also can work maybe for some other communities. So as we're thinking about trying to attract businesses into our community, a thought bubbled up and said, hey, 30 miles away from Newport, there actually is a much more thriving economic area around a place really dominated by Dartmouth College. It's sort of Hanover and Lebanon, New Hampshire, and so many communities nearby will have a community like that. There are lots of jobs. There's great educational opportunities. It's a great place, thriving area. And however, when you have an area like that, real estate prices tend to go up, and it becomes somewhat unaffordable for folks. And we said, gee whiz, if that's the kind of place that is only about 30 miles away, what if we kind of flip things on their head? And instead, let's think about Newport's a great place for folks to live, and maybe we can take advantage of the business and job opportunities that are really only 30 miles away. But what could we do to foster this? So the answer, or at least the answer we're pursuing aggressively right now, and I'm pretty excited about, is a bus service. So, and not sort of just an old cranky old bus service, but a really nice one, where there's daily commuting capability, where people can get on and get their Wi-Fi and be in a really comfortable location where they don't have to drive and do the commuting back and forth, and several times a day, and be dropped off, and make the commuting a really pleasant experience, such that people will not only be able to live in Newport and work 30 miles away, but choose to, and get those great families locating in Newport and finding it to be a community where they can actually afford much more housing and real estate and just a great place to live, and have the best of both worlds. So we're in the process of instituting that now, and it's just another one of those real game changers that either could happen or would not happen, but with a concerned group of citizens, organized, coordinated, really tapping into resources, as we call it, the Newport Sunshine Initiative, we're able to make this happen. So just another idea, Stephen, on ways people can kind of break out of traditional thinking and try to innovate in ways that are going to help their community.
It's interesting as I'm listening to you describe that solution. It just occurs to me that's an eminently entrepreneurial solution to that problem. The bureaucratic solution might be, well, we need to lay a train track, and we need train service, and we need all this stuff, and it's going to take us a decade. But the entrepreneurial solution is, well, let's just go get a bus because we already got the roads, and let's get a bus that will go back and forth, and let's get a nice bus, but let's see if this will work without,
Steve,
betting the farm.
You're so spot on. We've kind of lived this because the same set of issues has been studied many times, and but it has the problem, the governmental or the nonprofit organizational morass sometimes is difficult to get to action, and it can study a problem and maybe find some resources and maybe not, but tends to build a construct of a much larger solution set that has to be addressed. Whereas the way I'm thinking about this is exactly as you described. Let's pick a route, get a bus, let's start it, and then we can build from there. So you're absolutely right.
That's brilliant. Well, Jay, I appreciate you coming on today. I know we're about out of time. You've shared a tremendous amount of wisdom with us, and for folks listening, even if you're not in a situation to implement any of these specific ideas, what I love that, at least what I gained from this conversation, is a different way of looking at problems. And Jay, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Where can folks find out more about what you're doing, and where can they connect with you?
Yeah, two things. Certainly learn more about the Sunshine Initiative book and everything we're doing at my website, which is at jaylucas.us. It's spelled Jay, Lucas, LUCAS.us. So very, very easy to find, jaylucas.us. The other thing is the book. The book is listed there, but if you want to go find it, it's on Amazon. It's really simple. It's American Sunshine at Amazon. And either of those two ways, love to hear from you. You can email us at that website. There's an info place to send us some comments, and love to hear your comments, and we'd love to get back to you and develop a relationship. Anything we can do to help, in other words.
Outstanding. Jay, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for listening to the Unstoppable CEO podcast. Help others discover this show. Leave a review and rating on iTunes at unstoppableceo.net/iTunes.